The latest on missing California teenager Chelsea King.
17-year-old Chelsea King.
Young Chelsea King.
Chelsea King. A devastating 6-day search tonight. News is working every angle to this story. In the 1 o'clock hour this afternoon, search and rescue crews discovered a body in a shallow grave near the shores of Lake Hodges, believed to be that of 17-year-old Chelsea King.
I have called you monster, sociopath, serial killer, animal. You are all of those things.
Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell. In today's episode, we're diving into a heartbreaking case of Chelsea King. As we walk you through the details of her life, her disappearance, and the hunt for her killer, we'll also explore how her case led to powerful legal reforms aimed at protecting children from violent predators. Without further ado, let's get started. Born on July 2, 1992 in Poway, California, Chelsea was a beloved daughter to Brent and Kelly King. She grew up with strong family bonds, especially with her younger brother, with whom she shared an inseparable connection. By all accounts, Chelsea was an extraordinary young woman. She was academically gifted, earning a 4.2 GPA at Poway High School. She was well liked for her kindness, intelligence, and leadership qualities. Chelsea took part in many extracurricular activities, including the school's peer counseling program, where she offered support to fellow students going through difficult times. Rancho Bernardo Community Park is part of San Diego County, California. It's a favorite spot for families and outdoor enthusiasts, offering hiking trails, running paths, and scenic views. It was a place Chelsea frequented for her daily jogs. Chelsea wasn't just a runner, she was a girl with a cause. Together with her friends, she had been planning an environmental cleanup project at Rancho Bernardo Park. To prepare for this, Chelsea decided to visit the park one day before the planned cleanup to scout the area, and that day was February 25, 2010. Chelsea woke up early to attend a peer counseling session before school. She left her house at 6:15 a.m. After classes, she headed to Rancho Bernardo Park. Her parents expected her back by 5 p.m., but when the clock ticked past 6 p.m. with no sign of Chelsea, their concerns started to mount. Brent and Kelly King's worry turned into panic. They repeatedly tried calling Chelsea's phone, but it was off, an unusual and alarming detail since Chelsea was known for being responsible and keeping in touch. They began calling her friends, desperately hoping someone might know where she was or if she had made other plans. The calls yielded nothing. No one had seen or heard from Chelsea. By 7:30 p.m., her parents made the gut-wrenching decision to report her missing to the police. The search for Chelsea King began almost immediately. Her father, Brent King, contacted AT&T, hoping they could track Chelsea's phone. Within minutes, her location was pinpointed near Rancho Bernardo Park. Brent's heart pounded as he sped to the park, fear tightening its grip with each passing moment. When he arrived, a wave of dread washed over him. Chelsea's car was parked neatly in the lot, her personal belongings and school clothes left untouched inside.
I saw her car by the tennis courts, and I walk out on the tennis courts, and there's, I think, 8 tennis courts, and she wasn't on any of them. I feel like I'm starting not being able to breathe, and then I spin to head back, and I see some running trails.
Go down the path, call for her. Don't find her. Call the cops. And at this point, I have no idea what to think.
Brent knew Chelsea loved to run, often covering long distances before returning home. But a recent fainting spell during one of her jogs added a terrifying new layer to his worry. Could she have collapsed again, this time unable to call for help? The local authorities joined the effort, expanding the search area and bringing in dogs, helicopters, and ground units to assist. Investigators quickly noticed eerie similarities to another disappearance that occurred almost exactly 1 year earlier. The parallels raised the alarming question: could Chelsea have met a similar fate? As word of Chelsea's disappearance spread, the entire San Diego community rallied together. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search efforts, scouring the park, neighborhoods, and surrounding areas in hopes of finding Chelsea alive. Vigils were held, and social media platforms lit up with pleas for her safe return. 6 agonizing days passed with no sign of Chelsea, Then, on March 2, 2010, the search came to a devastating end. Deep within the trails of Rancho Bernardo Park, investigators discovered underwear and running shoes that belonged to Chelsea. The evidence pointed to one horrifying conclusion: Chelsea had been the victim of an attack. Forensic experts moved quickly to process the evidence, and what they found was both heartbreaking and shocking. DNA samples collected from the scene revealed presence of a male suspect, and when that DNA was run through the National Criminal Database, it produced a match: John Albert Gardner III, a convicted sex offender who had been released from prison years earlier. John Albert Gardner III was no stranger to law enforcement. Born on April 9, 1979 in California, Gardner had a long history of behavioral problems and mental health issues. His mother, Kathy Osborne, had endured years of hardship with John Sr., his father, who struggled with out-of-control drinking and even received a DUI. Kathy often worked long hours, leaving young John to be raised by aunts and cousins. Though close to his older half-sisters, Shannon and Serena, Gardner made disturbing claims of having an intimate relationship with one of his aunts. From the start, Gardner showed signs of severe behavioral problems. Plagued by asthma, allergies, and frequent ear infections as an infant, he was also hyperactive, difficult to manage, and prone to explosive temper tantrums. By the age of 4, he struggled with impulse control that doctors prescribed medication so he could focus in class. Desperate to cure him, Kathy increased his medication. But it backfired. The higher dosage pushed him into deeper depression, especially in the evening when he wasn't allowed to take the pills. In 1985, Kathy became a registered nurse and started giving Gardner even more medication to help him sleep at night. A few months later, she divorced John Sr. and moved into a new home with her son and her new boyfriend, Dan. But Gardner's problems only escalated. By February 1989, at just 10 years old, Gardner was admitted to an inpatient program at UCLA, where doctors diagnosed him with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and mixed emotional disturbances. Their reports were chilling. John exhibited intense hostility toward younger children and often lost control of his temper. At the age of 21, Gardner was arrested for assaulting his 13-year-old neighbor. Accused of brutally beating and having inappropriate activities, Gardner initially denied everything. Eventually, he confessed to physical assault, not more. However, evidence was stacked against him. During the trial, Kathy pleaded to grant her son mental health treatment and probation, blaming the girl for having a crush on her son. The court rejected her baseless plea. In 2000, Gardner was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison for the assault, but was released after serving only part of his sentence. Despite being labeled a high-risk offender, Gardner was allowed to re-enter society under the supervision of parole officers. After his release, Gardner's mental state was even worse. He repeatedly violated his parole and even lived near a daycare center. His mother was at the center of criticism. One of her colleagues voiced their concerns.
She knew he was a danger and never reported him. Her judgment could let other people out of a psychiatric facility that should not be. Staff do not respect her anymore and have to listen to her because she's in a position of authority. This is not right.
With his mother's protection, Gardner continued to have several run-ins with law enforcement, but none of these incidents got him back to prison. He managed to stay under the radar until Chelsea King disappeared. On February 24, 2010, Kathy and Dan took a 2-hour drive to visit Gardner's grandmother. They returned at around 1 a.m. the following morning. Gardner was not home and didn't answer Kathy's calls. When he finally returned later that evening, at around 8 p.m., he was filthy, drenched in sweat, and holding a headless snake. He calmly explained that the snake tried to attack him, so he killed it. However, Kathy noticed a deep gash across his nose, an injury that didn't look anything like a snake bite. The next day, while Kathy was at the nail salon, she was struck by the sight of posters and flyers plastered all over town. They carried the haunting image of 17-year-old Chelsea King. The news was everywhere, and it sent a chill down Kathy's spine. Once Gardner's DNA was matched to the crime scene, law enforcement knew they had their man. They tracked him down to a bar near Lake Hodges, just a few miles from Rancho Bernardo Park. He was arrested without incident, but even in custody, Gardner denied any involvement in Chelsea's disappearance. He claimed he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. At the station, investigators showed him a photo of Chelsea. Gardner insisted he didn't know the girl and claimed he was too intoxicated to provide clear answers. His words were slurred, but detectives weren't convinced. Despite the smell of alcohol on his breath, John wasn't stumbling or incoherent. He understood their questions all too well. His pants were soaked and muddy, and when asked about it, he explained that he had fallen while walking to the bar. Throughout the interrogation, he stuck to his story, insisting that he knew about Chelsea King through the news. However, his erratic behavior was hard to ignore. His mood swung wildly from defensiveness to indignation, declaring once again that he was being wrongfully accused, just like in his 2000 arrest. But then, in a strange twist, John made an offhand comment that set off alarms. He muttered, "They'll probably try to blame me for Amber Dubois too." The detectives froze. No one had mentioned Amber Dubois during the questioning. Yet here John was, drawing a connection between Chelsea King's case and Amber Dubois, the 14-year-old girl who had disappeared a year earlier. The investigators pressed him harder. They placed Chelsea pictures in front of him and demanded to know where she was. John continued to deny everything. But when the detectives left the room for a moment, John glanced at Chelsea's photo and whispered, "Bitch." As if Chelsea's missing wasn't horrifying enough, Gardner's arrest soon led to a chilling revelation about another unsolved case that had haunted the San Diego community. On the chilly, rainy morning of February 13, 2009, 14-year-old Amber Leanne Dubois vanished without a trace while walking to Escondido High School. Born on October 25, 1994, Amber lived with her mother, Carrie, and Carrie's boyfriend, Dave. She loved spending weekends with her father, Maurice. Amber was supposed to attend her classes and came home by the usual time, but as the clock ticked past 3:45 p.m. without a sign of her, concern turned to fear. Dave rushed to her school, only to find out Amber was absent all day. Panic set in. Dave and Carrie immediately filed a missing persons report. Escondido police immediately launched a search, combing the areas around her house and school. They discovered that Amber's phone had briefly powered on. This crucial lead sent waves of relief through her family. The Escondido Police Department wasted no time in issuing an emergency alert, pleading with the public for any information about Amber's whereabouts.
This is an important message from the Escondido Police Department regarding a missing juvenile at risk. The missing juvenile is Amber Leanne Dubois.
Carrie and Dave poured every ounce of their energy to search for their daughter, but Amber seemingly disappeared into thin air. As hours stretched into days, investigators began to fear the worst. This could be a kidnapping. A few days later, several people came forward, claiming to see her alive. These witness reports suggested a troubling theory. Amber had not been kidnapped, but she may have run away. Carrie immediately refused that idea.
They thought she ran away. They thought she met someone online. You know in your heart when something's wrong. The worst part is when you're looking and you're searching and you have no answers.
A search and rescue operation were organized at Rincon Middle School, where officers and volunteers passed out flyers and scoured the surrounding areas. Among the searchers was Derry's boyfriend and the last person to see Amber before she vanished. He cooperated fully, even taking a polygraph test 8 times, all of which he passed. A year passed, Amber was never found, and her family was left in limbo, unsure of what had happened to their daughter. Back at the Escondido police station, the detectives were forced to release John Gardner due to lack of evidence. They were frustrated and feeling like the case was slipping through their fingers. But then, a new lead emerged. News reports surfaced about another girl who was attacked nearly a year before, an attack eerily similar to Chelsea's case. And the description of the assailant? It matched John Gardner. On December 27, 2009, 22-year-old Candace Moncayo went for a routine jog around Lake Hodges. She completed her run around 10 a.m. when a tall, brown-haired man walked fast toward her. Before she could react, he lunged at her, slamming her to the ground with the full weight of his body. Candace realized he was about to sexually assault her. Using all her strength, she slammed her elbow into his nose, believing she might have broken it. The blow left her attacker stunned and confused, giving her the opportunity to escape. Candace sprinted for her life, adrenaline coursing through her veins, and called 911 as soon as she was safe. Authorities rushed to the scene, but despite their search, they found no trace of the man with the broken nose. They quickly dismissed the attack as a botched robbery attempt, rather than a sexual assault. Months later, amid the Chelsea King case, investigators reached out to Candace. They sent her a picture of Gardner, and without hesitation, she recognized him as the man who had attacked her that day. However, John Gardner's mother, Kathy, fiercely denied accusations against her son. She stood by his side, defended him at every turn. Investigators pressed her, hoping she might know something, anything that could lead them to Chelsea. They warned her of the danger her son posed, not just to Chelsea, but to the entire community, if he was behind this. Kathy remained tight-lipped. When interviewed by a Department of Justice agent, she mentioned that Gardner was taking medication for his mental health. She admitted he had outbursts from time to time, but deep down, Gardner was a kind-hearted man. On the day of Chelsea's disappearance, Kathy claimed Gardner had gone for one of his usual walks but didn't specify where. As investigators continued their relentless search, Gardner's picture was circulated in the media, and more witnesses began to come forward. Several people saw him walking along the same path Chelsea had run. Some even interacted with him briefly and reported unsettling feelings in his presence. The pieces were falling into place, and the image of John Gardner, once painted as misunderstood, was rapidly becoming a predator, stalking his prey. On March 2, 2010, FBI agents were navigating a boat along the south shore of Lake Hodges. As they scanned the shallow waters, something caught their eye. Blonde hair, barely visible among the mud. Chelsea's body was discovered, submerged just 10 feet from where her shoe was found. The bad weather on earlier search days obscured her body, and the scent dogs couldn't detect her under the water. The heartbreaking news was delivered personally by Sheriff Bill Gore, who had grown close to Chelsea's family throughout the investigation. He arrived at their home to share the devastating truth. Chelsea was gone, and her body had been recovered.
It was made by one of the searchers looking from the water up on the shoreline, spotted something that looked suspicious, and investigated and found, by moving some small debris, found Chelsea's body.
Supporters came in enormous numbers for a candlelight vigil late last night to mourn the teenager's tragic death.
With John Gardner now in custody, the prosecutors confirmed they would seek the death penalty. Gardner's defense team scrambled to negotiate a plea deal, hoping to spare him from execution. In a desperate bid for leniency, Gardner's attorneys struck a deal with the San Diego district attorney. Gardner would reveal the location of Amber Dubois' body to avoid death penalty. As Gardner led authorities to the burial site, officers were taken aback by his chilling composure. He remained disturbingly calm, even casually smoking cigarettes. Without remorse, he pointed to a shallow grave, admitted he had discarded Amber's clothes and belongings. While no intact body was found, investigators uncovered human hair, later confirmed to be Amber's remains. Amber's parents, Carrie, Maurice, and Dave, were summoned to the Escondido police station. The officers broke the news. They had found some of Amber's remains, but not her full body. Even after this discovery, neither the police nor medical examiners could provide a clear explanation of what had happened to Amber. This left Carrie with a bitter realization. Police took Chelsea's case much more serious than Amber's case. Determined not to let her daughter fade into obscurity, Carrie went on Larry King Live to publicly express her anguish and urge John Gardner to confess his crime. After Carrie's emotional appeal on national television, the district attorney informed that Gardner had taken a guilty plea to avoid death penalty. Yet, Carrie remained furious about the way her daughter's case was sloppily handled. To get Gardner's confession in Amber Dubois and Candace Moncayo's cases, Chelsea's family had no choice but agreeing to the plea deal. The district attorney knew that once they publicly announced John Gardner would escape death penalty, a storm of outrage would sweep his office. People would question the justice system's ability to deliver fair punishment for such horrific crimes. Meanwhile, John Gardner had his own plans. On April 25, 2010, he pleaded with the judge and his legal team for a chance to speak out. He requested to appear on KFMB TV to publicly apologize to the families of his victims. In a televised confession, Gardner admitted his heinous crimes, professing self-hatred and regret for everything he had done. But Gardner's attempt to seek sympathy fell flat. His remorse was seen as nothing more than a performance. Adding to the outrage, true crime author Caitlin Rother published a bestseller book titled Lost Girls, which chronicled the gruesome details of Gardner's crimes. When Rother reached out to him, Gardner asked if he could sign copies of the book, arrogantly suggesting that it would serve as a symbolic gesture. He claimed that was his way of accepting crimes and repenting to the victims' families. This brazen request disgusted those who had suffered the most. The families of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King were appalled by both the publication and Gardner's twisted desire to be remembered through it.
I think it's sick. He's not sorry. He's admitted before he doesn't know what remorse is. So why all of a sudden he's sorry?
On the day of his sentencing, John Gardner appeared restless, his gaze shifting nervously, unable to sit still. Despite his attorney's repeated advice to maintain composure, Gardner seemed lost in his own turmoil. When it was time for the victim impact statements, the tension in the courtroom grew palpable. Carrie, Maurice, and Dave took turns speaking about Amber, her kindness, her love for life, and the hole left in their hearts. As their words echoed through the silent courtroom, John's emotions wavered. Tears slid down his face at intervals, but whether they were tears of remorse or self-pity, no one could say.
Now, with our last hope for justice, we depend on the prison community to slowly and painfully cause your remaining days on this earth to be a living nightmare.
After Amber's family's testimony, Chelsea's parents stepped up, remembered her fearlessness and strength, qualities that stood in stark contrast to John Gardner's cowardice. They condemned him for hiding behind the excuse of mental illness, painting himself as a victim when, in reality, he knew exactly what he was doing. In their eyes, he was not just a predator, but a coward who tried to shift blame for the horrors he had inflicted.
In my view, until today, you did not deserve a name because your acts were not human. But as I thought about what I was going to say today, I realized that names like monster and animal, in a perverse way, let you off the hook. You know what you were doing when you chose to corner Chelsea. You could have prevented yourself from committing this crime. You had plenty of lucid moments after you viciously beat the 13-year-old girl 10 years ago. You knew who you were and what you were capable of.
You've stolen from a magnificent 13-year-old boy, his magnificent sister, and his ever-present best friend, that he should be deprived of a future without his sister is cause enough for you to burn in hell.
Throughout most of the sentencing, John Gardner kept his eyes fixed on the floor, occasionally shedding a tear, as if trying to display some guilt or regret. But the courtroom saw through his fragile facade. When his alive victim, Candace Moncayo, stepped forward, the mask he wore began to crack. After recounting her horrifying encounter, Candace bluntly asked, "How's your nose?" It was in that moment the courtroom saw the real monster he truly was.
I came here today for all of the women who have ever been victims of violence, to ask with Chelsea and Amber's voices to remove this man from our world, to make us a little safer by locking him up permanently, and to finally free us from this nightmare that he has created. And finally, to ask him how his nose is.
She did that for publicity.
Candace's words struck a nerve in John Gardner, igniting a flash of rage beneath his carefully constructed facade. He snarled, clenching his teeth, his face twisting into a wild, menacing expression. "She never hit me. She's a liar," he hissed to his attorney, his voice laced with venom. In that moment, the courtroom saw the true John Gardner, not a remorseful man, but a predator unmasked. During numerous interviews with investigators, the depth of Gardner's depravity became disturbingly clear. He confessed to more than just the murders of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King. He admitted to violently assaulting a prostitute, attempting several other failed attacks, and even stalking a 16-year-old girl. His reign of terror had cast a far wider shadow than anyone had initially realized. In the end, John Albert Gardner III was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Along with his prison sentence, he was ordered to pay $46,000 in fines and restitution to the families of his victims, including Candace Moncayo, and to the state. Justice could never undo the damage Gardner had wrought, but it ensured he would never harm another soul again.
This time it is the judgment and sentence of the court. Like the crime of murder in the first degree, Chelsea King under special circumstances, life without the possibility of parole. For the crime of murder in the first degree of Amber Dubois under special circumstances, life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the crime in count 2, assault with intent to commit a with 2 strikes, term is life in prison, mandatory minimum 25 years. The court orders those 3 life terms to be served consecutively.
In the wake of Chelsea's death, her parents, Brent and Kelly King, made it their mission to ensure that no other family would have to endure the same kind of tragedy. They channeled their grief into action, working tirelessly to pass Chelsea's Law, a piece of legislation designed to strengthen penalties for violent sex offenders and provide greater protection for children. Chelsea's Law introduced a one-strike provision for violent sex crimes against children, ensuring that offenders like John Gardner would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just one offense. The law also expanded parole supervision and created harsher penalties for those convicted of sex crimes. The law was passed with overwhelming support in the California state legislature and was signed into law by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2010. Chelsea's Law stands as a lasting legacy to Chelsea King, a symbol of hope born from the darkest of tragedies.
Governor Schwarzenegger, I thank you for your support and commitment. You've helped us fulfill our dream of doing everything in our power to prevent this tragedy from ever happening to another family again.
Today's case is one of the most heartbreaking stories we've covered on this channel. 2 innocent young girls were senselessly taken from this world. However, Chelsea's legacy lives on through the law that bears her name, protecting countless children from predators like John Gardner. It also raises difficult questions about our justice system. How could someone like Gardner, with a violent history and clear signs of danger, be allowed back into society? Should Gardner's mother be charged for protecting a predator? And whoever is responsible for Amber Dubois' case, should they be punished? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, if there's a case you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.